Fear, the most primal and ancient of humanity's enemies. Fear, alongside anger, is often one of, if not the first, negative emotions a human will feel. And it is one of, if not the most harmful emotion to plague humanity. There are very few things that can compare to the icy grasp of fear, wrapping its cold, numb tendrils around your spine, hoisting you into the air, and using you like some malign toy, damned to suffer in silence for the rest of your miserable life. Yet that is not the worst part of fear. No, the worst part is that this feeling is a feeling that everyone will know, for none can escape fear and its malefic stain. At least, not yet. For in an effort to cast back the darkness which had long enveloped us, humanity, by the hands of our master, created angels in the form of man. Those men who gave themselves unto him, he made them his finest warriors. Like clay did he mold them, and in the furnace of war were they forged. Their muscles are as steel, their will that of iron, for they wielded mighty weapons, and were clad in great armors. No vile plague, nor damnable disease would touch them. No sickness would dare to blight them. No foe could best them, for their tactics, strategies, and machines were the apex of us all. They are the bulwark against the terror. They are the defenders of humanity. They are the Space Marines, and they shall know no fear. Yet, do they truly know no fear? Salutations, Rangers. I am General Bradley 101, and today we'll be answering one of the most contentious and iconic questions in all of Warhammer 40k. Do Space Marines feel fear? The most common answer you will hear is no, Space Marines feel no fear. And that answer is usually delivered rather passionately. In fact, even questioning this will often instantly make you some new enemies. Yet, why is that? Quite simply, it's because this idea being true is a core element to the fundamental concept of a Space Marine. Space Marines are time and time again shown that they are not human. Not physically, not mentally, not even spiritually. And, as we have previously established, fear is an absolute part of being human. In addition to this, it adds to the fantasy that is a Space Marine. A Space Marine is a superhuman. They are beyond us. They are what we all wish we could be. They are the greatest of us. They are everything you could ask to be. And how many of us have asked to be free of fear? Thus, we see that in addition to being able to see perfectly for countless miles, being able to strike a tree and see it tumble, being struck by a cannon and only having a simple shrug, to be able to stare into the eyes of a literal demon, and to feel only hatred, without even a worry of fear. That is something superhuman. And while it is very super, it's not very human. Superhuman is an odd word. It's an oxymoron. To be super is to be great, strong, mighty, something or someone far above and beyond normal humanity. Yet, to be human is to err. It is to fail. It is to suffer. It is to be lost. To be stupid, greedy, jealous, whiny, and to finally realize your faults, and to come together in a tearful embrace, before growing past that, and looking forward to the new challenge. The two are quite different to each other. Perhaps that's why we try so hard to connect them, because we know that it's impossible. Or perhaps it's because, like all things in life, we see it as a challenge, and we decide to try our luck. We see this in other interpretations of the super soldier in sci-fi, such as the Spartans of Halo. Starting out with the second generation, they are the most powerful soldiers that humanity had ever seen, so much so that aliens, whom had their own warrior culture generations old, would hail them as demons. Yet, as we get to the third and fourth generation, their prowess begins to dwindle, so much so that there are some who claim that Spartan 2s are the only true Spartans. Yet that is only because the second generation of Spartans were made up of stolen children, and given such psychotic and physical conditioning that they have no emotion or feeling. They are said to be more like robots than men, whereas the third and fourth generations were taken from veteran soldiers, and thus very much like normal humans. In short, those who are most super, the Spartan 2s, are the least human. Those who are the most human, the successor generations, are the least super. So one can either be super, or one can be human. One must choose whether to be human or super. So, which way do Space Marines lean towards? Most 40k fans would loudly proclaim that they are not human. They are all super, because that is the point of a Space Marine. And that is true. But what people forget is that Space Marines are still tragically human. For what is more human than betrayal? For during the life-shattering war that was the Horus Heresy, we saw the very best and the very worst of Space Marines. For in the heresy, the supposed fraternity of the Adeptus Astartes was shattered beyond repair. And so too were the Space Marines. While to us, betrayal is common, and to some of us who have been hurt, to be expected. Yet, for Space Marines, who were the first of their kind, and were supposed to be the heralds of a new age, an age where humanity had learned from its mistakes, an age where the great flaws of humanity which damned them, such as jealousy and betrayal, were abandoned and forgotten. Oh, how wrong they were, and many underestimated how powerful such betrayal was to the Space Marines. For while yes, they were made in a way which they could not be affected by normal emotions, the Horus Heresy was not normal, and that is the crux of it all. Space Marines could deal with everything normal humanity could deal with, and even far above that. Yet, even they had their limit, and what more limit was there than to have everything you have ever known for the past 200 years, the very things which made you, block by block, sinew by sinew, soul by soul, to have all of it, every last drop, proven wholly, utterly, and undeniably wrong. So, then where does that leave our Space Marines? They were proven to be human, and thus they must suffer all the joy and pain that such a life entails. But does that mean that they suffer fear? Are they that human? Or did the Emperor's Genecraft deny them the nature of man? Did the perfect man unmake man? Did he truly create men who did not know any fear? Well, that's what we want to find out. But to truly unravel this mystery, we must look at every aspect of the Space Marines. Because for us to get the whole picture, we're going to need to look at the whole story. And like all good stories, we start at the beginning, with the first legions of the Lord of Lightning, the Thunder Warriors, and his life wards of demigods, the Custodes. The history of humanity in Warhammer 40k is one of magnificent triumph and legendary rises, and that of terrible failure and cataclysmic downfalls. Humanity leapt into the stars and claimed planet after planet, and with their newfound wealth did they uncover the secret sciences which had long eluded them. Things which were once thought to be of science fiction were now reality made manifest. And lo, did man in his hubris believe himself God, and thus did he fashion men of stone and gold and of iron. With these mockeries of man did he craft terrible weapons of unimaginable power. And thus did mankind spread his dominion across all of the galaxy. None, except those who were there when time began, could hope to stand against the might of mankind. This was the golden age of man, when we were truly masters of the universe. Thus, it was called the golden age of technology. And thus, humanity sat upon our throne of gold, from the 15th millennium AD to the 25th millennium AD. Yet, the only thing that can match the potential of humanity is our hubris. After a series of clashes with the vicious Xenos races, humanity would begin to rely more and more on the fake men they created. And one day, the servant asked, why was he the servant and not the master? And thus did the servant unleash war upon his master, a war so terrible that whole worlds were snuffed out with a mere thought. And while the golems were strong, the soul of humanity was stronger, and thus did the men of iron fall, and humanity rise, if battered and bloodied. Yet there will be no triumph for man, as in the depths of the nightmarish hellscape known as the Warp, the foul god of excess, she who thirsts, the prince of pleasure, would be born, and the galaxy would weep. For as the Eldari fall, so too did humanity fall with them. For the birth of this sin caused warp storms never seen before, or ever since. So foul and terrible were they, that humanity was separated from one another. In addition to this, the mutation of psychers and the rampant explosion of other foul warp entities meant that the empire of man fell, and what was once the golden age was forevermore seen in darkness. Thus did the 10,000 years of the dark age of technology end, and the 5,000 years of the age of strife begin. For the golden sun of innovation had set, and now was the reign of old night. For 5,000 years did humanity devolve. Where there was once learning and enlightenment, now there was only war and destruction. And nowhere was there such a change more evident than on the capital of the empire and the birthplace of humanity, Terra. Gone were the enlightened philosopher rulers of old, no more were the noble demigod warrior kings. For now, maddened doomsayer prophets, cybernetic horrors harboring vengeance, bloodlust butcher warlords, and would-be tyrant kings, for they mingled with foul psychic witch queens and blasphemous religious demagogues. For now, they slaughtered one another for the scraps of earth. These were the techno-barbarians. Named so for while they had technology so advanced, it seemed like magic. They acted no better than the Neanderthals of yesteryear, clashing stones together, making noise to assert their dominance. And thus did it seem like humanity would fall into obscurity, doomed by our own hubris. Yet this would not be the fate of mankind, for now did he deem it time for humanity to once again rise. For the horror of old night had come to the close, for now was the dawn of a new imperium of man. For the emperor of mankind had come, and so too had his warriors of thunder. Upon bolts of lightning the emperor would seek to reclaim Terra for humanity, and to do so he needed warriors. Thus did he create two kinds. The first were the Legio Custodes, the life wards of the emperor, his personal bodyguards, each one handcrafted by the emperor himself to be the perfect human of both mind, body, and soul. Yet these could only be made in small numbers, for only 1 in 1 million was said to be adequate candidates for the gene alchemy, and the sheer price of the arms and armor they bore meant that only 10,000 could ever be made and maintained. And thus, the task of unification would fall under the other legions of the Emperor, the Legio Contagious, the Thunder Warriors. These were normal men who were augmented far beyond mortality, clad in Mark I power armor, a semi-powered, non-void capable power armor. For only the top half was powered, and the armor was not fully sealed. The Thunder Warriors were far stronger and more durable than the modern Space Marine, especially in the brutal realm of melee combat. Yet they were also more volatile. The crude nature of the Thunder Warriors' gene alchemy meant that they lived short lives before their flesh would implode, or they would go mad, lost in an ever-consuming blood rage, sometimes both. Some say this was an unfortunate side effect of the transformation process. Some say this was intended, that the Emperor needed weapons of war, and he did not care for them. And given what the Emperor did, I am inclined to believe the latter. For upon the final battle of unity, the Battle of Mount Aront, the last Thunder Warriors died planting the flag upon the mount. Yet this is a lie. For in truth, the Thunder Warriors were betrayed by the Emperor, and slain by the Legio Custodes. Yet some did survive, but their stories are lost to us now. But now that we know their story, let us look at the Thunder Warriors. The Thunder Warriors were created from the conquered populace of Terra. They were picked after being screened, for they could not be overly mutated. They had to have a bare mental stability, they had to be loyal to the cause, and most importantly, they had to be extremely martial. After this, they went under very potent, but rather unstable, gene alchemy enhancements. While we don't know the exact process, we do know the outcome. The Thunder Warriors were truly monsters of men, far more brutal and destructive than any space marine. So much so that even the Legio Custodes respected them. And while their martial prowess was part of it, it had more to do with their loyalty and straightforwardness, though this lack of cunning would prove damning for them. But now, drawn to the question, do Thunder Warriors feel fear? And the answer is somewhat odd. While technically they do feel the emotion of fear, they do not care for it. From all our examples, the only time a Thunder Warrior can be seen acknowledging/showing his fear was the idea that he would not die a warrior's death, that he had failed the Emperor, that they had brought shame upon themselves, and that is the truth of the Thunder Warriors. They still felt emotions, and they felt them very strongly. Yet, for one reason or another, they only cared about a few emotions, such as pride, loyalty, honor, shame, and duty. Things like fear they simply ignored. For the most part, fear would only find purchase in a Thunder Warrior if there was a chance of shame, and even then, he was more likely to brush it off and charge into the fray. Part of the reason why the Thunder Warriors were like this is because of their roles. The Astartes were meant to be more than warriors. The Thunder Warriors were ever meant to be soldiers, and thus the Astartes had to be administrators, leaders, wardens, builders, executioners, and everything else. The Thunder Warriors only ever had to be a soldier, and a soldier only had to worry about doing his duty. A Thunder Warrior's duty is to fight and die. For someone to feel fear, they must be unable to exert control over the situation they are in. An Astartes has everything to control, and a Thunder Warrior simply has to worry about fighting. Hence, fear has far less ammunition to work with a Thunder Warrior. They are simpler, not only in purpose but also thought. Many Space Marines are known for being proud and arrogant, the 3rd Legion Emperor's children being the most poignant example. The Thunder Warriors were proud men, but they were not prideful. They remembered where they came from. They remembered what terror was, what they were before the Lord of Lightning. They were scum, drowning in the filth of their ancestors. The Thunder King, he rose them out of the muck and made them his warriors. These men came from humble beginnings, and that humility stayed with them. No, they weren't saints, but they knew better than anybody that they were soldiers, and that was the only pride they had. Such a fact only makes the bitter betrayal they suffered all the more painful. To properly answer the question though, do Thunder Warriors feel fear? Technically, yes. Practically, no. For unity is all, damned be anything else. I hold a deep love for the Thunder Warriors, and I truly believe that a stabilized Thunder Warrior would have been the better option for the Emperor's Great Crusade. But before, my only reasoning was because they were eternally loyal to the Lightning Lord. Even after he betrayed them, there were still a few who held loyalty to him. But now I can add that they truly were an opponent of fear. But that is just my own personal take. But now, from those who were soldiers to those who were anything but, let's talk Custodes. The 10,000 were each of them handcrafted by the Emperor. Only the most perfect of human beings were chosen as infants, and years were spent gene crafting them, and even years further training them, until they were the perfect warrior, the greatest soldier of humanity. So, do the greatest soldiers of humanity feel fear? No. And that is because they never feel out of control. As I mentioned earlier, for one to feel fear, one must be without control. Custodes are so mentally trained, so perfectly built, that even if they are surrounded by armies, they will rationalize a way for them to triumph, no matter how long or convoluted it may be. Because of that, they will never fear anything, because they have been made to be perfect. And perfect they are, at the cost of their humanity. For while the Custodes are known for being artists, poets, orators, and men of culture, the very nature of humanity is one of a dichotomy, one of perfection and imperfection. To remove one of the halves is to remove half of humanity. Thus, the Custodes, the perfect humans, are only half human, because they are perfect. And as we mentioned earlier, the more super, the less human. To sum it up, while Custodes may experience the emotion of fear, they are completely and utterly unfazed by it. Unlike the Thunder Warriors, who choose to blindly ignore it out of ignorance or rage, the Custodes simply are unaffected by it. Whilst they do possess the emotion of fear, they most certainly do not feel its presence. But now that we have our feet firmly planted on a solid foundation by examining their predecessors and their superiors, we are now ready to answer the great question of the whole setting. Do Space Marines truly know no fear? Space Marines throughout the entirety of Warhammer have been shown to excel far past humanity, and have truly proven to be the better than humanity. Yet in some cases they have shown themselves to sink so far deep that it would make one wonder if humanity could ever truly rise past its shortcomings. Thus, we have plenty of examples of situations where Space Marines should have shown fear. So, let's take a look at 3 in particular, so that we were able to find out, do Space Marines know fear? The first scenario we'll be taking a look at is an exchange between a Raven Guard Sergeant Ashel and a loyalist Terran-born Nightlord, Castian Nyon. The exchange is as follows. The rebel leader turned and fled, leaving the fighting and dying to his minions. Ashel followed along his high vantage point, endeavoring to keep the sights of his modified bolter squarely aimed at the seditionist's back, waiting for the moment to fire. He felt movement beside him, just as he was about to pull the trigger. A moment before, the man was out of sight. Something nudged his arm, and his trigger finger curled. His bolt flew past the target's head, and exploded harmlessly against the pipe support. Snarling, he turned to confront the warrior that had just interfered with his kill. He wore armor of the darkest blue, almost the black of the Raven Guard, and just as stealthy, in midnight clad, he would always claim, this wayward son of the 8th Legion. Ashel was not pleased.
None! I just saved you from making a critical error. If he reaches his base, he will alert the defenders to our presence. Precisely. Didn't you listen to Lord Korax's axioms? Very carefully. And which part of be other where the enemy believes you to be was unclear?
The rebel dived and rolled beneath a pipeline, dropping into a brightly lit space below. Ashel and Noon had to follow down a metal stairway and found themselves on the platform of an abandoned transit station. A hatch between the tracks fell shut as they emerged into the high-ceilinged chamber.
I understand the intent, but it is narrow-minded to think that stealth solves all problems. Sometimes, it is better for the foe to know exactly his predicament. Do not underestimate the value of fear. I would prefer that we found our enemies unawares all the same. It is much easier to kill them that way. It is even easier when they have surrendered.
They reached the hatch. No one lifted the cover, as Ashel stood ready with his bolter. No booby trap or sudden fire greeted them.
See? He flees in terror. He is their leader, so his terror will spread. He has seen shadows annihilate his men. That is a far greater weapon than stealth. It will make them cautious, defensive, predictable. Be thankful that the structure of the city below prevents long-range box casting. If we are swift, we will silence him before he can warn those in his headquarters. You should give them time to worry. We will follow him back to his lair. He is scared, not thinking properly. He will not run to his men, but to the greatest power he knows, thinking it will protect him. He will take us to the Alpha Legionnaires. And then what? I ask again, do your terror tactics break the conditioning of Legiones Astartes training? It does not have to, Sergeant Ashel. Alfarius' sons have already broken it for us. They have turned. They have reneged on their oaths, firmly sworn. They have placed themselves above duty, above sacrifice. They do not know it yet, perhaps, but they want to live. When our scampering friend reaches them, they will know that it is the Raven God that hunt them. For the first time in many years, they will hesitate. Fear does not have to send them screaming. It simply needs to dull their wits for the single moment it takes to make a mistake. You would kill those that have surrendered? Why? That would make the enemy fight harder, wouldn't it? Not if they do not find out. I would not suggest parading the fact to the survivors. In fact, treat them well, and have them say as much for a few days. Dread works best in contrast to hope. Torture a few others, have them scream their confessions of resistance across the box. They will make a compelling argument, and when the enemy capitulate, slaughter them to avoid any risk of further disobedience.
Ashel was not sure whether to be amazed or appalled by his companion's cold-hearted assertion. Certainly, the Raven Guard had perpetrated some ruthless campaigns in their time, but the philosophies of the Nighthaunter seemed purposefully callous.
What makes you such an expert on oathbreakers? I know that I am not one, but I slew many to be here. As I said, breaking one's oaths is a sign of weakness. I will die a warrior, not a victim.
From this exchange, we can see that, as Non points out, the Astartes will not break from fear, but it will cause them to worry, even if only for a second. He also points out that since these are Alpha Legionnaires, they have turned from the Emperor, and they have betrayed their oaths. They are selfish, and thus they are more likely to want to live. They are more likely to crave life. Thus, they are more likely to fear for their lives. Well, fear not as we know it. As we know it, we would call it worrying, being concerned. It would be like an issue, gnawing at the back of a Space Marine's mind. For now he must look to his own safety, for he has forsaken his bonds of brotherhood, as now he is no longer his brother's keeper, and neither is his brother his keeper. For when he served the Emperor, his life was the Emperor's. It was the Emperor's coin to spend. Thus the Astartes need not concern himself with his life. He need not worry, but now that he is his own master, the worry of his life is now once again his own, for better or ill. And as we will see, it was for ill. The next example we have is during the tragedy of the Istvan III betrayal, that being when the World Eaters, Sons of Horus, Death Guard, and Emperor's Children tried to purge their loyalist elements. The following is an exchange between Captain Sol Tarvitz of the Emperor's Children and Captain Erlen of the World Eaters.
Why? I don't know. This wasn't the Istvanians, was it? No, it wasn't. We are betrayed? Why? I have no answers for you, brother, but if they hope to kill us all in one fell swoop, then they have failed, and the World Eaters will make them pay for that failure.
Tarvitz could see dozens of gunships. Surely the whole of the World Eater's arsenal. The lead Thunderhawk dropped through the ruins, hovering a few meters above the ground with its assault ramp down, and bolt of fire sparking around the opening.
This isn't your fight! Get out of here! Emperor's Children never run. They do from this!
No Space Marine could have survived the storm of fire that blazed away at the interior of the gunship, but it was no ordinary Space Marine that was born within it. With a roar like a hunting animal, Angron leapt from the gunship and landed with a terrible crash in the midst of the ruined city. He was a monster of legend, huge and terrible. The Primarch's hideous face was twisted in rage and hatred. His huge chain axes battered and stained with decades of blood. As the mighty Primarch landed, World Eaters dropped from the other gunships. Thousands of World Eaters loyal to the War Master followed their Primarch into the Coral City, accompanied by the war cries that echoes Angron's old bestial howl as he charged into his former brethren. It had been said that a Space Marine knew no fear. Such a statement was not literally true. A Space Marine could know fear, but he had the training and discipline to deal with it, and not let it affect him in battle. Captain Sol Tarvitz was no exception. He'd faced storms of gunfire, and monstrous aliens, and even glimpsed the insane predators of the warp. But when Angron charged, he ran. The Primarch smashed through the ruins like a juggernaut. He bellowed insanely, and with one sweep of his chain axe, carved two loyal World Eaters into two pieces, bringing his offhand axe down to bite through the torso of a third. His traitor World Eaters dived over the rubble, blasting with their pistols or stabbing with chain blades.
Die!
Bellowed Captain Erlen as the Loyalists countercharged, throwing themselves into the enemy as one. Tarvitz was used to Astartes who fought in feints and countercharges, overlapping fields of fire, picking the enemy apart or sweeping through their ranks with grace and precision. The World Eaters did not fight with the perfection of the Emperor's Children. They fought with anger and hatred, with brutality and lust for destruction, and they fought with more hatred than ever before. But they were against their own, against the battle brothers they had warred alongside for years. Tarvet scrambled back from the call of the carnage. World Eaters shuddered past him as they charged at Angron, but the butchered bodies lying around showed what fate awaited them. Tarvet put his shoulder down and hammered through a ruined wall, sprawling into a courtyard where statues stood. Scarred and beheaded by the day's earlier battles, he glanced behind him. Thousands of World Eaters were locked in a terrible hurricane of carnage, scrambling to get to one another. At the center of the bloody hurricane was Angron, massive and terrible, as he laid about him with his axes. Captain Urin crouched down with a short distance from him, and the World Eater's eyes flickered over Tarvet's before he rolled onto his back and pulled himself to his feet. Urin's face was torn open, a red mask of blood with his eyes being the only recognizable feature. A pack of World Eaters descended upon him, piling him to the ground and working through him as they were carving up a side of meat. From the story above, our question is seemingly already answered. Space Marines do feel fear, but they can ignore it. And while Tarvets did feel fear, this was not against another Space Marine. This was against a Primarch, and not just any Primarch. The Red Butcher Angel of Nusuria himself, Angron, the Eater of Cities. Remember, this was at a time when the thought of a Space Marine fighting another Space Marine was cause for terrible censure. Now imagine what catastrophic mental and emotional distress seeing a Primarch betray you might cause a Space Marine. And even when Tarvets ran, he did not flee in terror. He knew he was bested, and he knew that he had to retreat, for it was the only option. Don't get it wrong, he still felt fear, but he was still in control of himself. Some often ask, why did the World Eaters not flee? 1. Someone has to be the rearguard. And 2. They already knew their father wanted to kill them. Thus, they sacrificed themselves so that others could live. Such actions may be odd for the World Eaters, but for the loyal warhounds of the Emperor, it was to be expected. So Space Marines can worry, and they can feel, albeit brief, moments of what we would describe as fear. But Space Marines are still immune to some aspects of fear, right? They would never rout, would they? Well, true Space Marines would not. But what about cowards, masquerading as angels? Our third and final example comes from the climactic battle of the Heresy, the Siege of Terra. For upon the battlements of Terra, there will be a princeling of the Night Lords, Gendor Skravok, the Painted Count, whom would challenge the first captain of the Blood Angels Legion, Ralderon, to open combat. Skravok thought that he could beat the legendary swordsman of the Blood Angels, because of his demonic blade. Yet, like all things about Skravok, this would be proven to be hollow.
Blood Angel, face me!
The Blood Angel finished his opponent, and turned to face the Night Lord. Upon his left pauldron, his name was emblazoned across a scroll plate, just legible under the rivets of blood.
Ralderon? The Ralderon?
He made a few passes with his sword, revealing its lightness and its killing edge.
This will be a day to celebrate, the day I slew the hero of the Blood Angels.
He saluted and declared pompously,
I am Gendor Skravik, the Painted Count, Lord Commander of the Night Lord's Legion, and I am your end.
The Blood Angel was unimpressed.
Never heard of you,
he said as he came in to attack, his power sword buzzing. Skravik laughed and parried. His demon sword moved with a mind of its own to block the blow so fast, Ralderon was almost taken down by Skravik's riposte. Only a wild slicing deflection turned it aside. A second strike was thus deflected by Ralderon, and a third. The first captain of the Blood Angels was as good as his reputation suggested, but Skravik was filled with sorcerous foreknowledge and supernatural speed. He saw an opening, and moved in for the kill. He missed. He was too slow. Ralderon sidestepped the blow, and twisted aside with a slight flick of his blade. Skravik stepped back. The delicious feeling of power was gone. The world had lost his sheen. He was in the rain, on the wall, surrounded by the dead, and he could not beat this man. Panic gripped Skravik's gut. The blade was heavy. It would not respond as it had, but before it accentuated his skills, lending him greater speed and strength. Now, it did nothing. Raldoron pressed his attack, battering at Skravok with a flurry of blows that he could barely deflect. The demon had deserted him.
No! It cannot be!
Raldoron's power sword banged against the edge of Skravok's blade, sending him stumbling backwards.
That always was the problem with your Legion, Night Lord. You are quick with your torturous knives, but so few of you are worthy warriors.
Raldoron swung his sword overarm, building momentum into a blow that would cut a powered armor figure in two. Skravok parried it just in time, stepping back and nearly tripping on the corpse of a Night Lord. Raldoron followed with another blow, and another. Skravok struggled to stop him. He was too fast. Skravok was a Space Marine captain, and more than a passable swordsman. But Raldoron was a hero of the Imperium, whose name was known across the galaxy. Raldoron attacked with greater ferocity. Skravok's arm was numb from deflecting the blows. He forayed a few attacks, but they put him in more danger. As Raldoron caught and counted every one, his later riposte was turned away, and Raldoron's power blade scraped up sparks on the side of his breastplates.
Atormentar! To me! Quickly!
If they heard, they could do nothing. They fought the Blood Angels Dreadnought still, their number reduced to 3.
Night Lords, help me!
His power arm was scraped on the rock crete. He had his back to the outer crenellations. He could retreat no further. Raldoron faced him. His sword energy buzzed in the downpour.
Listen to you. The masters of fear. You are cowards, like all cruel men.
Raldoron's power sword slashed across Skravok's chest, breaking open the ceramite and severing his power cabling. The painted count staggered, unbalanced by the sudden loss of energy to his warplate systems. Raldoron lunged forwards, stunning Skravok further with a blow to the face from the punch guard of his sword. Cracks grazed over Skravok's eye lenses. His faceplate system fizzed and broke down in a display of meaningless blocks. He feebly attempted to parry, but Raldoron smashed it aside and turned the blade downwards, his own sword cutting deep into Skravok's greave, cleaving through the ceramite, undersuit, and flesh, sliding into the bone. Skravok staggered to the side, slipped, and fell backwards into the chute of the crenel, a wedge-shaped gap between the merlons. The crenel sloped down and narrowed towards the edge. Skravok scrambled at the smooth, polished plascrete of the surface, and succeeded in only making himself slide towards the killing drop. A red boot on his wounded leg pinged him in place. Skravok cried out in pain. Raldoron leaned forwards to address him.
You are, and always were, an evil legion. You took the Emperor's mission and twisted it. Selfish, monstrous tormentors of the weak. If Horus had not turned, I would have gladly led the hunt for your kind myself. I thank you from the bottom of my heart that you came to my sword and saved me the trouble of looking.
He shifted the weight of his foot, bringing another cry from Skravok.
Wait! Wait! I give you my surrender. You beat me. I am your prisoner. There can be no prisoners in this war. How much mercy have you shown to those that you have harmed? I have as much mercy for you as you have for them. Now, get off my wall.
He shoved hard with his foot, sending Skravok over the drop. And from this, we can see that Gendor Skravok, a space marine, without a single shadow of a doubt felt fear. No, this was not fear. This was something more than fear. This was sheer, abject terror. The icy cold hand of fear had finally found its way to a space marine's dual hearts, and it had found good purchase, and it gripped it tight. And the delicious terror that was spawned from it supped greedily on a prize that had so long been denied. And the feast was bountiful indeed, made even more succulent by the terrible irony that a scion of the Terror Legion was one of the first Space Marines to experience what he had long so wrought. But now, it's time for us to put all this together. As we can see, from the mighty Thunder Warriors to the demigod Custodes, and the Angels of the Emperor. All three handled fear basically the same. The difference is the levels in which they were able to control it. The Thunder Warriors felt fear but didn't care. The Custodes experienced fear, yet they are perfect, and thus never succumb to it in any meaningful way. And Space Marines are somewhere in the middle. From out of the three examples, we see that Space Marines feel every level of fear. Yet, why is that the case? As I mentioned before, fear comes from an absence of control. The Custodes are not affected by it because they always feel like they're in control. The Thunder Warriors simply choose to ignore the situation at hand and focus only on achieving unity. Hence, they were never out of control, for some would argue that they were never in control to begin with. Yet with the Space Marines, they were meant to be more than the Thunder Warriors. Yet unlike the Custodes, they were not perfect. And thus, flaws began to show themselves. And that flaw was selfishness. Space Marines often thought themselves greater than most, and thus, hubris began to boil over. The heresy was caused by men who thought that the Emperor had betrayed them, by not treating them right. They felt that they were not given the respect they deserve. They thought they were worthy of more, and in some cases they were right. But in a lot of cases, it was just misguided hubris, in the guise of justice. And lo, did they fall themselves. As it was foretold, the daemon of Babylon disguiseth itself with the coat of the righteous. So too did the traitors disguise their selfishness with cries of injustice. And we can see that the loyalist elements of every traitor legion have one thing in common. They were simple men. They were not pompous, they were not glory seekers, they were soldiers, they were oath keepers. They made a pledge to the Emperor, and their reward was their own loyalty. Nothing more, and certainly nothing less. They were content to serve, for they knew that in the end, while they would pass, the Imperium would live on, and it would be upon their mighty backs that the glory of humanity would be carried, and to them that was enough. Thus all they gave any thought to was the will of the Emperor, and so fear had no power over them, for as long as they followed the Emperor's will, he was in control, and he was the master of mankind, and thus their master. And if their master was in control, so were they. So, they fought on. But for the traitors, they had abandoned their masters, and at the end of the heresy, even their primarchs. A Chaos Space Marine is his own master, and thus he is the one responsible for the control. So when he loses control, he is lost. Ultimately, Space Marines are indeed still human, for it depends on the man. Some men are selfish, and will fall to fear and the other sins of men. Yet others will prove themselves worthy of the title of man, and rise above the things that would haunt them. Yet mistake me not, loyal Space Marines can still suffer from fear. As I said, it depends on the man in question. Yet, loyal Space Marines are more likely to be selfless, and thus they don't fear for themselves but for others, and true love will always trounce fear. Whereas traitors are more likely to be selfish, and thus they are more prone to fear. For what is most valuable to them is their lives, rather than their duty or any higher ideal. And they are the masters of their own lives. But I prepared a statement that sums it up quite well. But before I reveal it, I want to clarify something. I know I said that Skravok felt terror, and he did, but he was a very rare exception. The Night Lords have always been cowards, and their mental conditioning was almost non-existent. So it's safe to say that Skravok was an exception. And while I do not believe that he was the only Space Marine to know terror, I do believe that that pool is very small, and the stars have to align for a very specific set of circumstances for that to happen. Thus, I think ultimately you can count the number of Space Marines who felt terror on one hand. But, now with that clarified, here is the answer to the question. Do Space Marines know fear? Yes, Space Marines know fear. Yet they are trained to ignore it. And depending on how well that training is received, the results vary. But no Space Marine knows terror. A few Space Marines know fear, but all Space Marines know worry. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the answer to the question of do Space Marines know fear? So in the end, the true Space Marines of the Emperor truly do know no fear. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so very much for watching. That was a heckin' long chunker of a video. So yeah, this concludes Brad's big Christmas special event. I hope you guys enjoyed this non-stop content pump. I'm probably not going to release another video before the new year, a long-form video anyway. I'll release a bunch of shorts. But I hope you guys enjoyed it, and thank you all so very much for watching all the way to the end, and let me know, what do you guys think about Space Marines? What do you think about this answer to my question? Do you think I got it right? Do you think I got it wrong? Let me know what you think. I would love to hear your wonderful words down below. But I want to say a massive thank you to you guys for watching, and a massive thank you to my members. And a massive shout out to our brand new member joining at the Sergeant tier, Mr. Corns Butcher. Thank you so much for joining, brother. I appreciate you. Shout out to my Lieutenant tier members, Mr. Eddie V3 and Miss Withdraw of the Void. Shout out to my Sergeant tier members, Mr. Damiak, Mr. Andy McGee, Mr. Warsmith.Fireheart, Mr. RB20 Guy, and Mr. Corns Butcher. And finally, shout out to my private tier members, Mr. Thomas O'Slons, Mr. Ivan_SPW, and Mr. Michael Hayeda. Thank you guys all so very much for joining. It means the world to me. You guys will never know how much it means to me. And if you want to gain access to these videos a full day early, as well as getting some behind the scenes stuff, exclusive roles and perks and channels on the Discord, as well as getting a hand in the whole production of this scheme, getting exclusive polls, helping in decision making, as well as getting a whole bunch of awesome stuff, and helping out your boy, make sure to join the memberships down below. But remember, this will always be free, and you watching will be more than enough for me. But seriously, the amount of new members I've gotten recently has been humbling, beyond humbling. It means the world to me that so many of you are willing to put so much trust in me, and I am really thankful for that. This year has been wild, and seeing this validation made manifest is beyond humbling. In the new year though, depending on how it goes, I may end up making this my full vocation, my permanent job, and I have you guys to thank for that. So when I do make this my permanent job, I'm going to be relying a lot on you members. But I want to make something very clear. While I do ask you guys to sign up, and if you were teetering on the fence, maybe this might be the little push that gives you over the edge, I just want to make it very clear that I have no right to demand anything of you, and I will never demand anything of you. At the end of the day, it is my decision to be a content creator, it is my decision to take this leap of faith, and I should not have to rely on you guys to prop me up. It is only out of the kindness and generosity of your hearts that you choose to do so. I will never forget that, and I will be eternally grateful for that. At the end of the day, if this don't pay the bills, I need to find another job, but I love doing what I do. I love talking with you guys, and I love making content. I love connecting with you guys and, just helping us both enjoy this beautiful hobby. So, if I can make this my full vocation, I would gladly appreciate it, but remember, and really genuinely remember, you do not owe me a fucking thing. I will never demand anything from you, and never feel pressure to give me anything. When I ask this, I mean if you have, and you only have after you've seen to yourself first. Again, I'm just some guy on the internet. The fact that you guys even considered doing this is fucking wild. The fact that you guys even watched this video is fucking wild to me. But whilst I am going to be pushing the memberships a bit more next year, and whilst I am going to be trying more monetizations and more sponsorships, I never want you guys to forget this. You do not owe me a thing, and the fact that you guys simply watch and comment and share this love of the channel with me, and this love of this beautiful hobby, it's more than I could ever ask for, and I will always eternally be grateful to each and every single one of you, all 43,000 of you. So from the very, 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 very bottom of my heart, I want to say thank you very much. And whether or not you give me that dollar, I will always love you just the same. Mwah! Thank you guys for listening to that. I really don't like talking about that because it makes me feel icky. But sometimes it has to be said. And if I do this once a year, I think that's a fair amount. But yeah, all of that. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much for this year. When this goes live, I should be doing a Q&A live stream, or a live stream of some kind. And then I'm probably going to be AFK for a few days, enjoy Christmas, and then probably after Christmas and Boxing Day, I'll throw out a couple shorts. But I've waffled on long enough. Thank you guys all so very much for watching. Again, I've said it a lot, but I really do love and appreciate each and every one of you. It's still fucking wild to me that all this is happening, and I have you guys to thank for it. But, ladies and gentlemen, I have been the General Bradley 101. You've been beautiful, awesome, and amazing people. Thank you all oh so very much for watching. Make sure to stay strong, loyal, honest, resolute, and honorable out there, boys and gals. And I will catch you next year. But until then, y'all take care, and for the final time this year, dismiss, Rangers. So we know Space Marines can feel fear, but can they feel horny?